Hello! So today I'm going to be talking about The People in the Trees by Hanya Yanagihara. This is Hanya Yanagihara's debut novel, and after really enjoying, loving A Little Life and really enjoying In Paradise, I can't believe it's taken me this long to get around to her debut. One of the main themes of this novel is power and abuse, specifically looking at scientific exploration and cultural encounters. Another theme of this novel would be Western imperialism and cultural exploitation. The novel is critiquing Western intrusion on indigenous cultures and specifically the sort of ethical implications of such actions. And I would say the final theme of this novel is moral relativism. The novel is exploring the very subjective nature of morality, especially concerning actions justified under the guise of scientific development. The novel is presented as a fictional memoir. It's a first-person account of Dr. Norton Perina's life and his scientific findings. Norton is writing this memoir whilst he is in prison. However, this entire memoir is framed and edited by his very loyal colleague, Ronald, who provides an introduction but also footnotes throughout the entirety. Before we get into the meat of this story, I just want to preface everything by saying Norton, Dr. Norton Perina, is an absolute dickhead and is very much painted out to be a dickhead from the off. Now, I might be interpreting this novel completely incorrectly, but I found this novel very, very funny, and mainly because of how much of an arsehole Norton is painted out to be, how much of an egotistical, absolute uppity prick he presents himself to be, even in his own first-person account. It's almost satirical how much of a dickhead he is, and how much Hanya Yanagihara is kind of like pointing light at sort of like the scientific community and their sort of drive for scientific advancement at that time. Yeah, I was laughing my arse off constantly, but I was a little bit like, am I supposed to be? And just to add on, and actually I'm just guessing here because I can't quite remember, but a majority of this novel, a majority of the memoir takes place in the 50s. So I think it kind of spans from like the 1920s all the way up until the late 1990s. I think that's the timeline of this novel. Sorry, I can't quite remember, but all I can definitely remember is, yeah, the main chunk of the novel does take place in the 1950s. So story-wise, we get a fair amount about Norton's upbringing, his family, his relationship with his brother, with his parents, his auntie. We go into a lot of detail, loved all of that stuff, thought it was great. He then goes off to medical school, and he gets on okay at medical school. He gets middling grades, he's all right. He still has this arrogance that he's like the best in the class, and he's only doing it because he has to, because it's a stepping stone to something else. He then joins a sort of like a medical research team, and he sort of gets on okay there, but eventually he leaves that. And then at the end of his kind of, when he graduates, he gets offered the opportunity to go on this expedition. And the expedition is to a fictional Micronesian island called Ivu'ivu. And honestly, I have no idea if that's how you pronounce it. Ivu'ivu? I do not know. Throughout the entirety of the book, I sort of early on stuck with that, and my brain just went, that's all your dyslexic brain can handle. Just call it Ivu'ivu. So that's what I called it throughout. Alongside Norton on this expedition is the one heading the expedition with all the funding, Dr. Tallent, and his assistant, Esme. And needless to say, Esme and Norton do not get along. This sort of kind of trying to one-up each other, or this sort of Norton trying to prove that he is the best kind of thing. And Norton does have a kind of respect for Tallent, but he still thinks that he's better than him. And on this island, they are searching for a kind of lost tribe of people, or people not really lost, but they've been told about them, but they just can't quite find them. And of course they do indeed find this tribe of people, but what's more interesting to Norton and Tallent and Esme is that on the outskirts of this tribe, deep in the forest, they find these people. They're very confused, they're sort of wandering around, and they sort of take them on and look after them, and they slowly start to discover that they are very, very old, but don't appear to look so. The more they research, the more they chat to the actual tribe, the more they find out that these sort of people on the outskirts, the dreamers, they could be in fact around 200 years old. Norton is absolutely fascinated by this, and he must get to the root of what is allowing these people and their bodies to not age. He then discovers that their extended lifespan, but also their mental degradation, is due to this turtle that lives in a very specific part of the island. Norton then brings his discovery back to the scientific community, and what we then see is an absolute decimation of the culture of the island, as this incredible scientific discovery causes the entire world to want to monetize these turtles. And yeah, what we see is just a complete breakdown of this sort of tribe and community of people that we had spent so much time with. And over time, once Norton is back from the island, he starts to adopt these sort of lost children from Ivu'ivu. And yeah, I'm not going to go into any spoilers right now, but that's kind of linked to the reason he's in prison. So what did I like and what didn't I like? What I liked. Well, first up, I just love Hanya Yanagihara's writing. I've loved it in everything she's written so far, and it's really nice to know that she had it within her first novel. Everything is just painted so vividly, and it is incredibly immersive. I just felt like I was there. The details, it doesn't overdo it. She doesn't it's not painstakingly detailed, but it's just beautifully pitched, in which the whole world was brought to life without sort of sacrificing the pace of the novel. It was just, yeah, her writing is great. And the next thing I liked for pretty much the entirety of the novel, except for maybe the last section, which I'll get into in my spoiler talk, I thought that even though Norton is portrayed as an absolute dickhead, I did find it very, very funny. I found it hilarious. A real sort of stab at the sort of scientific community, almost white man syndrome back at that time, the importance of scientific discovery and all of that. And the arrogance of him is just like, the more it builds and goes on, you just know like, oh, what new discovery are they going to find? And how much is Norton going to hate it or kind of despise it? Or, you know, and it just... but regardless of that, regardless of how heavy-handed the novel is in painting him out to be awful, he does have depth. There is layers within the awfulness. And I was constantly throughout, especially sort of growing up with him and moving on with him in his sort of progression and the turns that takes with him at times, I just thought it was really good, like really good. And yeah, so I do think that like Norton as a character and Tallent as well are all very interesting, even though we're seeing them through the lens of Norton. I thought the characters were brought to life, yeah, really, really well. And the final thing I absolutely loved about this novel is just the ethical dilemmas that it presents within it, the themes that it's exploring, the kind of, you know, what is at cost with scientific pursuits. And I think the novel does a great job of zoning in on something very sort of small and personal, but exploring these huge implications of it and the sort of the ripple effect of those actions. And I thought, yeah, all of its themes were being explored in a really interesting way. It's very thought-provoking. Yeah, loved it for that. What didn't I like? Okay, so I only have one big negative, and it can be broken down into a sort of non-spoiler way of telling you about it and a spoiler way of telling you about it. So let's start with the non-spoiler version. So the novel shifts in its last section when Norton sort of leaves Ivu'ivu for the first time. He goes back a couple of times, but that first time he leaves and we sort of step away, the novel sort of shifts and it moves in a way that I was like, oh yeah, this is what would happen. And then it sort of just focuses on his adoption of the Ivu'ivu children. And there's this tonal shift that really didn't work for me. Thematically, I can see why this shift takes place, because Norton is writing this memoir, and he is obviously hiding something. The reason he's in prison kind of thing. So you can understand why he, you know, the shift sort of goes in that direction. But I think just from a reader's perspective, I didn't like that shift, regardless of whether it was from Norton's perspective or not, and regardless of whether that works with sort of Norton's mindset. As a reader, the shift didn't work. Okay, so now it's time for my spoilery stuff. I'm going to put a timestamp up here, bam, and click to that and you'll get my very final sort of thoughts on the novel. Okay, spoiler time. So, on the island of Ivu'ivu, with this sort of lost tribe, they do these rituals, loads of rituals. They have all these different rituals for the moon, all these different kind of things. But one of the rituals that they discover is that in order to teach the children about sex, the older generation will have sex with the children. And sometimes they will do this in groups of the adults all having sex with one child. And of course, at the time, this shocks Tallent, Esme, and Norton. But this is a part of the tribe's life and what they do. Sex is very open within this tribal community. You could just walk through the village and see people just having sex in the corner, here, there, and everywhere, with adults and children. It's just just open as a community, and that's how they operate. Now, in the memoir, Norton talks about an encounter he has with one of the young boys he witnesses in one of these rituals. And of course, he doesn't openly state it in his memoir, but if we read between the lines, which is not hard to do, it's very obvious that Norton had a sexual encounter with this child. So, of course, later on, when he starts adopting all these children in the back of our minds, even though nothing is overtly said, it's very sinister. We imagine that he's just adopting all these children to bring them home and then to sexually abuse them. Yeah, and it's quite a turn. It's very disturbing. It is very disturbing. However, it feels like a real sort of kind of, if you didn't think he was a monster before, look at what he's doing kind of thing that Hanya Yanagihara is doing. And she does foreshadow it with this moment, you know, with the tribe witnessing it, and then this sort of encounter with the child. She is foreshadowing earlier on that this is something he may have come obsessed with, and actually his link to the island is the fact that he's a paedophile, and that he, you know, that's his link, that's his strength, that's what he wants, that's what he needs. However, because the novel sort of just shifts into this kind of him adopting all the children, all of a sudden it just feels like this very tacked on way of being like, see, he is a monster. And for me, I already knew he was an absolute monster before any of this. Now, of course, it does add a sinister edge to the sort of themes of this story and the absolute decimation of communities and the taking everything from them. And it is fitting within a kind of real sledgehammer punch at the end to be like, and if I haven't got my point across, here you go. But I just personally felt like it could have been handled differently. Now, Hanya Yanagihara does have a get out of jail free card because this is Norton's perspective. So he's probably writing this in a way that's trying to hide everything. And that sudden shift to it all being about him adopting the children and sort of fading away from anything else is because he's writing about his time with his children and what he did in his later life. And he's trying to avoid saying any of the other stuff. So that is Hanya Yanagihara's Get Out of Jail Free Card. But it just, I don't know. It's really hard for me to pinpoint, but just tonally, structurally, even if the Get Out of Jail Free Card works, it doesn't work for me as a reader. So my final thoughts on The People in the Trees. I thought it was a thought-provoking read. I thought a really provocative exploration of sort of morality and power and the cost of scientific pursuits. And other than that last section, I was loving this book. It was a sort of 5-star book, but because of that sort of tonal shift at the end, I'm landing on maybe like a 4-star. I thought it was excellent, but maybe it's like a 3.5 very good to excellent sort of thing. It's somewhere, if you're going to put a number on it, which is impossible to do, that's kind of where I'm at. But, you know, this is the final Yanagihara book that she's released that I've read, and I've enjoyed everything she's put out. Absolutely everything I've enjoyed. I've either thought was amazing or excellent. So yeah, I'm just going to continue to read anything she releases. I think she's excellent. So have you read The People in the Trees? And if so, what did you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Please let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you're well. I hope you're enjoying whatever you might be reading, and I'll see you all on the next one.